The self-reliant former Princess Lee Radziwill has disappeared at the age of 85. Following in the footsteps of her famous elder sister Jacqueline Kennedy, she was wealthy, ambitious, and highly esteemed. Although Jacqueline was one of the most recognized women in the world and the wife of President John F. Kennedy, Lee was forever at odds with her. But Lee was an independent woman in her own right. As a global socialite and fashion star, she consistently placed high on rankings of the world's most fashionable women. She was primarily known as Jacqueline's sister, despite the widespread acclaim for her artistic pursuits and achievements. Now that Lee is no longer here, we can uncover her life's secrets, including how she amassed her fortune and the accomplishments her sister concealed. You will be shocked by what we are about to reveal. When Caroline Lee Bouvier was born in 1933, it was in New York City's Doctors Hospital. Her parents, Janet Norton Lee and Jack Bouvier, III, were prominent members of society. The fact that people started calling her Lee instead of her given name the moment she was born was one of her peculiarities. The future president, John F. Kennedy, and Jacqueline, her older sister, were brought up together. When Lee was a little girl, her family lived on Park Avenue, and every summer they would take a vacation to the Hamptons to get away from the city. Even though Lee transferred schools multiple times before starting college, her education was impacted because all of her secondary schools were top-notch. She attended Miss Porter's School in Farmington, Connecticut, and the Chapin School in New York City. She also attended the Potomac School in Washington, D.C. Eventually, she settled on Sarah Lawrence College as the place to get her bachelor's degree. Nonetheless, she decided to study art in Italy during her sophomore year. Black Jack, a renowned person on Wall Street, was Lee's father. His infidelity and drunkenness caused the family to divorce when she was a small girl. Regardless, they maintained their status as a royal family in New York and enjoyed extensive influence and ties among the city's upper class. The girls stayed with their mother, who remarried to Hugh Auchincloss and graciously welcomed them into his Virginia house, while their father remained single. Prior to his marriage to Jacqueline, Hugh had wed 3 times, the third of which was to her mother. From the time they were little girls, Lee felt her father was more interested in Jacqueline, and she even felt jealous of her. The sisters kept in touch with Jack even though they lived apart. The spotlight was frequently on her sister, who was over 4 years older than her. Her father adored Jacqueline since she was an exceptional student and an inspiration to her peers. The girl's mother had 2 more half-siblings and 3 step-siblings through Hugh's previous marriages. Lee, who lived in high society for a while after graduation, made her social debut in an astonishing full-page photograph that appeared on page 71 of the Debutante section of Life magazine's December 25, 1950 edition. Are you aware that Lee's private life did create some obstacles for her professional aspirations? When choosing a settler, Lee was very careful to follow the 3 strikes rule. On April 18, 1953, at the tender age of 21, she tied the knot with publishing executive Michael Temple Canfield, marking her first marriage. In the fairy tale she had always dreamed of, her biological father had the honor of walking down the aisle with her as she exchanged vows. When Lee was younger, all she wanted was to break free from her mother's grip, and Michael provided just that. He had it all: good looks, intelligence, connections, and money. The newlyweds settled into a stately home in Chester Square, London after their wedding. There they enjoyed an unforgettable honeymoon period where he poured his heart out to her. It felt as if I had stepped into a magical storybook. Despite Michael's great editing resume, his illiterate origins, and his position as head of Harper Brothers, he was a habitual drinker. Lee was too weak to enter his room through the front door when he fell into a stupor from his vices. This prompted him to try to rescue not just himself but also his wife when he regained consciousness. He tried to halt multiple times, but each time was unsuccessful. Despite the turmoil in her marriage, Lee met the Polish Lithuanian Prince Stanislaw Albrecht Radziwill and fell madly in love with him. It was around this time that John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy tied the knot. To arrange for Lee's marriage to Prince Stanislaw, the Kennedys had to intervene and pull strings. After contacting the Pope and the Vatican, they were able to have Lee and Michael's marriage annulled. Thus, Lee tied the knot with another genuine royal on March 19, 1959. If the claims that Prince George, Duke of Kent, was Michael Canfield's biological father were true, it would have made him a legitimate prince. Therefore, this was really ironic. Now we can discuss Anthony and Christina, the offspring of Prince Stanislaw and Lee. It is undeniable that a property near Buckingham Palace is a surefire way to attract other nobility. A number of theories circulated as to why their marriage would fall apart in the end. Several sources state that Prince Stanislaw's extramarital affairs and Lee's budding passion with Aristotle Onassis, a Greek shipping magnate who would subsequently become her brother-in-law, were the main reasons why the marriage ended. She allegedly had an affair with photographer Peter Beard, among other things, which led to their 1974 divorce. While Lee did have other loves and infatuations, none of them brought her the joy or understanding of life and living that she felt with Stas. Lee spoke about their time together in a later interview. "I consider my marriage to Stas to be my life's greatest accomplishment. It follows that he was my perfect match." Leaving the worlds of royalty and monarchy behind for what appeared to be her final opportunity at love, Lee married director Herbert Ross in 1988. Herbert, a major figure in his day, directed smash hits like Steel Magnolias, Play It Again, Sam, and The Goodbye Girl. Jackie Kennedy's New York residence was the site of a lavish luncheon in honor of the newlyweds following the ceremony at her Fifth Avenue apartment. However, their marriage did not last forever. Divorce papers were filed by them in 2001. Lee claimed that Herbert was different from any other man he had been associated with. Beyond that, she was forthright about her dislike of Hollywood and its exclusive mentality, and her discovery that the film industry was less exciting than it had appeared. Since her sister Jacqueline was Lee's rock for the most part, let's delve into their relationship. Despite the fact that Lee was perpetually inferior to her sister when they were growing up, the two maintained a close relationship for a long time. Their adult bond was strong both before and during Jacqueline's tenure as First Lady. They were inseparable. They were close throughout their lives, sharing holidays and family reunions, going to the White House, hosting the Kennedys at their London townhouse, and most famously, a month-long journey to Pakistan, India, Italy in 1962. Caroline, Lee's given name, allowed the Kennedys to strengthen their familial links, as Lee had previously been known by her middle name. President Kennedy had also given his approval to Anna Christina Radziwill, who was Lee's daughter from her marriage to Prince Stanislaw. Things began to alter, however, following the president's infamous assassination in 1963. Lee immediately left her home in London after hearing about the tragedy and flew to Washington, D.C., to be there for her sister and offer her the empathy and support she needed. As the nation observed, she stood as a visible rock for Jacqueline as she carried her husband's coffin to the Capitol to lie in state, and then to the Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle for the burial. At Arlington National Cemetery, not even Lee could control her emotions as the flag-draped Air Force One paid homage during the burial. Among them, she stood alone. Subsequent revelations revealed her secret respect for Jacqueline's bravery, which she expressed by leaving tokens of her affection on her pillow. Jacqueline and her children left the White House for Ambassador W. Averell Harriman's house in Georgetown, where Harriman helped Jacqueline get through the last horrible day. Lee also assisted Jacqueline with her move to New York, which was a few streets up Fifth Avenue from the apartment that Lee had just purchased. These two beautiful sisters, who had won others' backs and loved each other deeply, were eventually torn apart by heartbreak. Even though there seemed to be some sort of romance between Lee and the infamous ladies' man Aristotle Onassis, the media never formally confirmed the relationship. Within the exclusive circle of affluent society, it is hardly shocking that Aristotle, a Greek shipping mogul, had a long acquaintance with the Radziwills. They had dined with him at London dinner parties and sailed with him on the Christina. Lee reached out to Jacqueline in August 1963 to convey an offer from Aristotle to unwind on his yacht. This was in response to Patrick's untimely birth and subsequent death. Tensions between the sisters started building up at this point. Following her acceptance of the offer and the lengthy journey across the Aegean Sea with the Radziwills, Jacqueline sought solitude in order to grieve. Diana Du Bois delves deeply into the ways in which Jacqueline impacted Aristotle during their voyage in her sister's shadow, an intimate biography of Lee Radziwill published in 1995. Jackie appears to have influenced Aristotle on the voyage, contrary to what Lee told to her closest friends, who claimed that her sister's attendance aboard the Christina had been totally altruistic. At the end of the book, it is stated that Jacqueline's theft of Aristotle's work caused a rift between the two women. This rift, along with Jacqueline's parallel developments with Robert Kennedy following the assassination, marked the start of a lasting and significant shift in their relationship. Many people from that time say that Robert Kennedy supposedly gave Jacqueline profound emotional support for months following the murder. People started to wonder whether they were closer after seeing the two having serious chats multiple times. It caused a stir for a while, even though no new evidence was ever presented that was pertinent. Lee lost control of her car and slammed into another vehicle after learning of Bobby Kennedy's death in London in June 1968. She was so distraught. Her sister's fears that the U.S. had descended into unchecked violence, leaving anybody with the surname Kennedy exposed, were even more alarming. After considering her options, Jacqueline decided to leave. Interestingly, she was able to pull it off thanks to Aristotle Onassis. Jacqueline was promised millions of dollars in a prenuptial agreement shortly after they began dating. They were wed 5 years after the president's assassination in a ceremony that made headlines. Lee was a guest at the wedding that took place on Scorpios, the island that belonged to Aristotle. In later interviews, Lee denied having an affair with Aristotle and assured the media that she felt absolutely no remorse for the strained relationship she had with Jacqueline following Aristotle's marriage. In later interviews, Lee refuted the claims and laughed off the stories. No one seemed to acknowledge or attempt to mend the reality that they had grown apart, and even the uninitiated could tell. Aristotle had always been Lee's legitimate claimant, but Jacqueline showed up and took him away, just as she had done from the time they were children. This is already problematic, and the idea that her sister could be able to win over her daughter's heart would be hard for Lee to fathom. Christina, who is the daughter of Lee, struggled greatly with negative self-perception as a child. The teen's already low self-esteem was further exacerbated by the fact that her mother was abnormally thin. Lee loved Christina and her 2 kids with all his heart, but their relationship went south and Christina couldn't stand being around him. Because of her aunt, Christina felt better and loved her more, but Christina's mother missed the red flags that her daughter was hiding problems. Christina uprooted her life a few blocks north to join Jacqueline after deciding she couldn't stand living with her mom any longer. Lee was even more enraged, and a rift was driven between the sisters as she silently grabbed her possessions. The sisters started to drift apart in the 1960s when Lee made friends with architects and designers Renzo Mangiardino, Cecil Beaton, Truman Capote, and others. Swiftly, Lee joined Truman Capote's group of esteemed female friends, or swans as they call them. Lee and Truman had an uncommon bond. Regardless of his creative accomplishments, Truman was convinced that the powerful and attractive would never invite him into their salons due to his sexual orientation. Like Lee, he felt completely at home whenever her older sister was around. It was as if they were pleased with their apparent inferiority to one another. It seems that Lee, distraught at her sister Jackie's heartless actions after her 1968 wedding to Aristotle, went to see Truman in tears. Lee was always in her sister's shadow, but Truman decided to support her acting career so she could finally shine. When she started acting professionally in 1967, she enrolled in acting schools including the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art and the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. It was Truman's recommendation that Tracy Lord, played by Philip Berry's comic The Philadelphia Story, get her debuted as the hedonistic, free-spirited socialite. She was the media's and public's darling since she was Jacqueline Kennedy's royal sister. Although there was a lot of excitement for the premiere, the subsequent criticism was quite shocking. Some critics even went to the extent of writing, "A new star is not born," in the Chicago Tribune, demonstrating their deep scorn for her acting skills. Lee kept acting even if she got bad reviews. Her performance was deemed clumsy and amateurish by several critics. After meeting with producer David Susskind, Truman strongly suggested casting his protégé in a TV drama. Thereafter, the decision was made to re-star Gene Tierney, who had previously gained Lee's stardom in a similar character in the 1944 Otto Preminger classic Laura. Truman was a co-writer of the show, and it made its national debut on ABC in January 1968. Lee continued to be largely unpopular among critics. "She had a beautiful face, but no one expected her to have great acting skills," said New York Times writer Jack Gould. After realizing his acting career had little possibility of becoming a superstar, Lee went back to London. At this period, Truman and Lee's relationship faced a number of difficulties. Truman was uncooperative when Gore Vidal asked her to testify in a libel suit. Because of this, they ended up fighting. According to Truman's testimony in the case, Vidal's inebriation led to his expulsion from the Kennedy White House. Anger at Attorney General Robert Kennedy caused him to be hurried away to his hotel by his friends. Following Lee's inability to present sufficient evidence, Truman felt obliged to apologize and appease Mr. Vidal. Their connection was finally destroyed by Truman's ratcheting personality. Because of this, it wasn't the crushing blow. Lee told Truman everything she knew about the complicated bond between the sisters and her innermost thoughts and feelings, and Truman told her everything she needed to hear. In what he thought would be his magnum opus of literary, Truman immersed himself in the lives of the numerous prominent women he knew. Although he never put the book out into the world, he did divulge some chapters that had some closely guarded information. Lee became an outcast, and nobody wanted to be around him because of this unfortunate deed. I bet you didn't realize Lee had a successful career in interior design. Here you will soon discover the answer. Lee devoted herself entirely to acting, ignoring her other, less flashy but no less impressive talent: fashion and design. Lee experimented with interior design while residing at the stunning Turville Grange estate with her second husband. She enlisted the assistance of Lorenzo Mongiardino, an Italian stage designer. Famous photographers like Horst P. Horst and Cecil Beaton were utterly enchanted by the magnificent furnishings and frequently captured images of the estates. After spending so much time at Mongiardino, where she refined her refined style, Lee decided to try her hand at design. She found the task of outfitting a house fascinating, even though the people who lived there would only spend a few days there a year. As a result of her success with them, she established her own interior design firm in 1976. Thanks to the positive attention she received, including a feature spread in Architectural Digest, she was able to attract a handful of corporate and affluent private clients. In 1996, Lee was inducted into the prestigious Vanity Fair International Best Dressed Hall of Fame, a testament to her exquisite taste in clothing. Even her homes reflected her impeccable taste. Her Manhattan property was located at 160 East 72nd Street, and her Paris residence was at 49 Avenue Montaigne. Elle Decor featured Lee's stunning homes in their April 2009 issue, giving readers a taste of her refined taste in interior design. In February 2013, Lee spoke with Sofia Coppola, the film's directors, about her life. Discussing privacy in the contemporary world, in an essay for Style, a publication of the New York Times, she revealed personal details about her life. When Lee was named one of the 50 most stylish people aged 50 and over in 2013 by The Guardian, it was another recognition of her reign over style and fashion. Lee remained committed to the fashion industry all through her life, as did Giorgio Armani, who regarded her as one of his most important personalities. Since Lee did not receive a significant inheritance, she had a more difficult time affording her sister's lavish lifestyle. Even after selling her Paris flat and other possessions, she was barely able to make ends meet. To assist her financially, her mother probably set up a trust fund. Lee peacefully passed away at her New York home in February 2019, at the age of 85. Her funeral took place on February 25th at St. Thomas More in New York City. With a slew of influential people in the art and fashion industries in attendance. It was attended by notable people such as Jacqueline Kennedy, Carol Radziwill, Dita Blair, Sofia Coppola, Carolina Herrera, Peter Beard, and Andre Leontali. Their tribute to her charming personality and hilarious antics was a nod to her enduring impact on the culture and fashion sectors. Even though Lee supposedly had money problems while she was living, her estimated posthumous estate was worth more than $50 million. In her last will and testament dated September 2018, Lee designated her daughter, Anna Christina Tina Radziwill, as the only beneficiary of her immense fortune. Unexpectedly, half of the money from Lee's estate auction was to go to her daughter, according to her will. Rather than her daughter, Lee nominated two male acquaintances who were not known to be in her inner circle as her executors, which was seen as unexpected. Because they would be able to collect huge fees from her estate, the selected executors were now in a very advantageous financial position. The abrupt distribution of Lee's undisclosed multi-million-dollar bequest was met with widespread amazement upon its public release. After spending her entire life in the First Lady's shadow, the renowned socialite made sure her daughter, whom she had abandoned, would receive all the attention in her final act.